Welcome to the first episode of the Real Talk Real Estate Show. On this show, we're going to bring you relevant content that deals with all aspects of the real estate transaction. That includes those looking to get into development, the real estate investment aspect, all the way to those making their first purchase on their forever home that just want to know more information about the process and how that all works. And on top of that, I hope you get involved. We want your interaction. You can use the hashtag AskJohnFox on any of our social media, which includes Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or snap me at JonathanFoxDC, where I promise, as long as it's relevant, to answer all of your questions on this program. And if it's not, I'll still send you a message back. So we want you to have fun with this. We want you to interact with us. And at the end of the day, we hope that this program adds value to your next real estate transaction, whenever that is. So stay tuned. We have a lot more coming your way. Washington, D.C. real estate. Fiercely competitive and always changing. Where people from all corners of the world come to make their mark. So on this show, we get real. Real about what actually matters. Where I show you what's behind the curtain. And you get a new perspective. Because having the knowledge and insight means the difference between winning and losing. Welcome to Real Talk Real Estate. So as many of you know, I regularly write for the Washington Post real estate section. And given the fact this is our first episode, and therefore I really don't have any questions from you to answer, I thought it may make sense to jump into something that is relevant to anyone selling a property. And for you buyers out there that think, hey, I'm not in the market to sell anything, it doesn't matter. Believe me, it does. Because at some point, you too are going to be a seller whenever that time comes. So this is an article that was written last week and featured in the real estate section of the Washington Post, and we're obviously going to post a link in the bio or in the comments below at the end of this video. So if you want to read it there, check it out. But I'll give you some of the highlights and something that I believe will definitely mean something to you if you're thinking about selling a property. The article is titled, How to Get Top Dollar for Your Home. And though that may seem pretty intuitive or something that is easy to understand, you would be shocked. I mean shocked how few people that are selling their property really go through the process of doing the right things to end up with the result of getting top dollar for their home. And as someone that's in 100 homes a week, I'll tell you, I've seen probably 90% of the properties on the market, and this includes high-end stuff in the city, all the way down to the smallest place in the suburbs, how few people really go through this process. So I think it's important to talk about, and I'll jump right in. And there's three basic things. Number one, and I put it first because I think this is the hardest. So if you hear nothing else, this is the most important. Lose your emotions. I'll say that again. Lose your emotions when it comes time to sell your property. And I'll tell you why. The number one enemy that you have when it comes time to sell anything is your emotional reaction to whatever the marketplace is going to do. And let's face it, selling a property is unlike anything else you're going to do. And I say that to mean there are memories, it's where you lived. I don't care if it's an investment property, maybe you remember that tenant that didn't pay you rent that one time and how you had to fix up the property. I mean, all properties have a story. And so at the end of the day, there's an emotional response to that. And I always tell my sellers this, the minute you decide to sell is the minute that you no longer have a home or house, you have a product. And it should be treated like that. And that may sound kind of harsh or something that doesn't really resonate, but I'll tell you this, when you go through the process of selling a property, you no longer are in control of the outcome of what's going to happen. And I also say this, me being maybe someone who's going to represent them on the listing, and them being the owners, are the only two people that are not in the market for that house. I'm not going to write them the check. That'd be a conflict of interest. And they certainly can't rebuy their own house. So what I think about your house, the value, the staging, the colors, and what you think about the staging, pricing, colors, you name it, quite frankly don't matter. It's what they think, the buyers. And so there are a couple things you can do, but at the end of the day, having an emotional opinion about your property, the pricing, the staging, anything like that is just going to work against you. And so I just say that is the most critical first step, and it is something that if you get anything right, get that part right. So that's my first point. The second thing I will say is that you got to create clean spaces and clear vision. I'll say that, quite frankly, it kind of is what it sounds like, but it's something that so many sellers miss. Number one, cleaning. I can't tell you how many properties I've been into this week that have just dirt and grime, cat hair, whatever. And look, I understand you have to live in the house, but at the same time, going back to that first point, whenever you decide to sell your property, you no longer have a home or a house that you enjoy, you have a product. You have to present that product in its best light. And the quickest way you can do that is to clean the property. And I use this analogy. If I were to say, you're going to sell your car, what's the first thing you would do? You would run it right down to the car wash and get it detailed. Why? It doesn't change a thing about the miles, the engine, the model, none of that changes. So therefore value doesn't really change, but you just feel like it needs to be perfectly clean and spotless when showing it to that potential buyer. Well, your house is the exact same thing. So creating those clean spaces is so important. The second thing, the clear vision. I'll say this, decluttering is, next to remodeling and doing other things, probably one of the most effective tools and strategies that you can utilize. And that literally means just getting rid of stuff, purging it out of the house, in the storage locker, in the garage, in the attic, wherever you can put things to create those clear visions for the buyer is going to be in your best interest. And I hear a lot of stuff, take down the pictures of the family, and I understand that you don't want to necessarily look like, you don't want to present your house as something that's so personal that someone else can't picture themselves in there, but really that's like very much secondary. If you don't create those clear visions for that buyer in clean spaces, they won't care what's on your walls. It won't matter. They will just judge that they don't feel good about being in your house. And so it's really comes down to creating those emotional experiences that are going to affect the buyer in a positive way. And if you want to get specific, what that looks like, lighting and flooring. So if you've decluttered and you've cleaned, the next thing you can do that will add value to your next sale is to brighten the house. So many dark spaces in a lot of our homes, and I get it. You don't think about it, the lamp in the corner, it does not work, at least when it comes time to, again, show your product. So one of the best things you can do is add recessed lighting, brighten up all these walk-through rooms that buyers just kind of cruise through, because ultimately you're going to have, the showing experience goes a lot like this. Someone walks from room to room, they look left, they look right, and they make some type of decision about how they felt in that room. And they move through the house in a couple minutes, that's it. And at the end of that, they understand already if they're in love with your house, if they just like it, or if it's not for them. So again, creating bright, open, clean, airy spaces where the flooring matches the walls with the neutral paint and the lighting goes a long way. And I could talk a lot more about that, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there as something that is so important when it comes time to what can I do to enhance the value without having to remodel everything, because let's face it, that's not necessarily practical for a lot of people. So this third point, before I get into it, I will say it's an easily misunderstood point, and if you have not executed properly on point number one, to lose your emotions, and number two, create that space that a buyer can see themselves living in, then this number three does not matter. But if you've executed properly on number one and number two, this is a game changer. So I'll say this, your property has a story to tell. Make sure it gets told. It is my job as a real estate professional to understand where a property exists and to market it accordingly. However, going back to that first point, who establishes the value of anything? It's the buyer, not the seller, not me. It's the marketplace. It's really that simple. So understanding where your property is and who your target demographic is for your property, for your commodity, for your product, is going to make all of the difference whether you are successful or not. I say this to mean a single millennial looking in Logan Circle has a much different opinion of value than a family with 4 kids looking in the suburbs. They just see it differently. They see that maybe a single person looking for a 1-bedroom in the city might say, having a turnkey property that I don't have to put work into is going to make all the difference to me. So if that is your property, if you have a 1-bedroom in the city and someone has a lot of work to do, and you have a lot of work to do to get the property up to par, then I would say you're probably limiting the demographic that is most likely to look at your house, which means your pool of buyers just went down, which at the end of the day means less eyes that are really looking at your property are going to go your direction. And you just keep shrinking the buying pool that's going to be interested in your property, which means less money. So if you do the right stuff, you create a property that a buyer does not have to come in and spend a ton of money on, you have already just enhanced your target demographic. And I'll say this to mean too, if you have a house in the suburbs and it would be perfect for a family with a couple kids, and you know a ton about your neighborhood, and you know the schools are great and whatnot. I'm limited as to what I can and can't do as a real estate professional. Obviously, I can't discriminate. I show the properties to anyone, but you can make sure that your property shows and appeals to those individuals that are most likely going to be in your house. So something I tell my clients all the time: if you have excellent schools, great parks, whatever it is, make sure some of that content ends up in the property when I'm doing the open house. Leave it out so people come across it. Also, maybe you didn't use that 4th bedroom as anything, you just left it vacant. Well, my suggestion to you would be, maybe you should set that up as a media room with bunk beds and in a space that someone with a couple kids might look at and be like, wow, that makes a lot of sense for my family. And it just, again, creates that emotional experience. So it's a misunderstood step, and there's a lot more I could say about it, but at the end of the day, your property always, 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 always has a story to tell. Make sure it gets told, and that includes doing everything you possibly can to appeal to the largest demographic that is probably going to look at your property. So, I think that right there says a lot about ways that you, without remodeling anything, without going through and changing the countertops or all the stuff that I get asked on a regular basis, should we? We just set all that aside. I just gave you tangible things that you can do that are very cost effective, that are going to take your time. I get it. Taking a few weekends, maybe you missed that episode of House of Cards because you're cleaning out you're putting stuff in storage, cleaning out your garage. I mean, it's your time, it's your energy, but it's not your money, and that will add value to your property, and at the end of the day, make the people looking at it see it in a much more favorable light. So I think I'll leave it at that. I hope you got something out of that. Again, we'll post a link to the article at the end of this, and I want you to come back and see us next week because we're going to have questions. Who knows, we may even have a guest. And at the end of the day, when you participate, your questions will be on this show, and I'm going to answer them. So I look forward to meeting you, talking to you online, and ultimately seeing you back here next week. Thanks. Did that sound okay? It was too long.